bets talks today, but mostly I wanted we wanted to re-enter ourselves into the conversation. We've been out of it sort of because we haven't had our sports back for a while. I've actually gotten pretty heavily into golf, so we can talk about that a little bit in future shows or even today. But overall, we want to talk about futures bets today. We have some good ones. We're going to have a futures bet section coming very soon on the BetQL site, and we just don't have it up quite yet. But in the meantime, we want to talk about some future odds bets that we like. I'm going to give it a few minutes and let people kind of have a little bit of time to get in the room, make sure this is working because we're doing this under a completely different new format. Shout out to Dan and the guys at the QLTV to really making things happen over there for us and providing a much, much better system than we had before. We know it'll take a while to get a few of you guys in here. We need to have a lot more going on, but hopefully as time goes on, we'll have a lot of you guys jump on in and join us, and should be good times. Anyway, feel free to say hi and chat when you come on in. I love that. I love, keeping in touch with the audience. We're probably just going to be on about 20 minutes today, 25 minutes. There's not a huge amount to talk about, but I do think with this unusual situation, there are bets to take advantage of, especially in some of these future bets for titles. We'll get into baseball in a minute. I know there's a lot of questions out there about these sports playing at all. I have those same questions. I'm very skeptical. We also have players dropping out by the day in both sports, both a fear of COVID for their family, practical reasons for their kids. There's a lot of things going on. And we always factor in regular injuries to it. In this interesting format, with some of these extreme odds on teams that we already know are in the playoffs, I just think it's worth probably noting, that there probably is more value than you might think here. So we'll talk a little bit about that. When you can jump on in, throw in your favorite future bet for any sport. Happy to talk that over with you guys. I think that any of them would be interesting. For me, I really like I'll get into it in a minute because I've got a few that I want to kind of wait for a few people to come on in so we can really make sure that we have this happening. I'm also going to tweet this out so I get some of our people in the chat because I want this to be a back and forth show. It will be in general. We'll also be doing videos, so it won't be like we're required, and we'll be more organized on those. But for right now, we wanted to try and run this program live, partially as a test, partially to talk about some of my favorite future plays, and to remind you that BetQL is still around, and we are going to be going strong for the rest of whatever sports season we do have, and along with whatever DFS seasons we have as well. So I'm going to actually tweet this out right now. In the meantime, jump on in chat, say hello. Whoever you are, please just say hello. Just it's always nice to see who we got in chat. I'm going to tweet this out right now. Sorry about this. This is great TV, huh? Great internet. What do you call it when you're doing a cast like this? But we have to do this sometimes, so it's a little tricky. We'll have people doing it on the back end in the future, but for right now, I'm going to go ahead and do it. All right, QLTV, and we are out. That's out right now. There we go. Looks like BetQL sent it out as well. Hopefully, some of our people. Okay, here we go. And we really are starting the show officially at noon, so I've been a little bit scrambling because we wanted to make sure this works and everything. But it looks like everything's going pretty good, and I think we're off to a decent start, just making sure on the technical side that everything is going. But again, jump on in, say hello. We haven't seen you guys in a while, so it would be nice to catch up a little bit. I'm gonna just say what's up in chat to make sure the chat's working because again, haven't been doing this for a while. A couple future bets that I wanted to highlight. I know it's a little blurry on the screen for some reason. I'm not really sure why. Hopefully it's not too bad for you guys out there. I've got it a little bit blurry not on my part of the screen, but when I look at it through the YouTube angle. I wanted to mention a few bets that I really like. I think that, look, I'm not saying the 76ers are going to win the title. If we played this 28 times, I think they have a real shot. They are a team that I liked as a long shot bet while the season was going regular. I know that they're a team that was incredibly good at home and horrible on the road, and they have a really good home crowd, and people would say, why are they going to be any better? It's not that. It's the way that they're built in terms of the playoffs, especially in an East where I think that they really only have one team that I would be afraid of if I were them, and that would be the Bucks. And they actually are the team that's sort of built to stop the Bucks. So at 28-1, I really think that you're getting a really, 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 really good value. I'm a little surprised you see the Rockets only at 12 because they were one of my favorites too after this. But with the odds being the way that they are, to have them as the fourth favorite in the NBA seems a little crazy. But I also think that there's a path where this is a situation where I just feel like they have, enough guys, an unusual style that could be a problem. The problem I'm running into is that I think this situation is really going to favor the deep teams. If there were teams I was betting on, I had to bet my life on it to win the title, I would bet on the Bucks and the Clippers. I think the Clippers would be my number one. The Bucks would be my number two. I think the Clippers can win games or even series without a Paul George or a Kawhi Leonard. They're not going to win it all without both of them, but one of them could go down, and you could end up still getting through a series, potentially even two, if need be, for the Clippers and for the Bucks for that. Well, for the Bucks, the problem is it's all Giannis. Everybody else is sort of interchangeable. They can play so many different ways. They're so deep, but if you lose Giannis, same thing with the Lakers with LeBron or AD. I just think that sort of takes them out of it. Where the Clippers are the only team in that situation that I don't feel like they'd be out of a series, even without one of those guys, because of the incredible depth, because of Lou Williams coming off the bench who could light it up for a series. You know what I mean? If he needs to. You've got so much strength at so many positions for that team, even without Landry Shamet playing, or whether he does or doesn't from the COVID. I haven't got an official word on that. But I just think there's enough depth for that team that they can really, really make some noise, even without Paul George or Kawhi Leonard for certain games or potentially series, if it came to that. So, guys, we got some feedback coming in. Nice to hear from you, Sheets. Good to see you in there. I love Dan. Dan jumped out with the Marlins at 75,000, plus 75,000. I think I'm all in. I think I'm way in on that. We're going to get into baseball in a minute, but I wanted to start off with my love, my NBA, because I truly think it has a better chance of playing than baseball does. And I'm also a much, much bigger fan, but I do think we've got some great baseball bets. I want to tease that a little bit. Anybody in a 60-game format, when anybody can win a 4 out of 7, and it's not like the baseball team, the best team wins the 4 out of 7. They win about 60% of the time. They're not going to win every time. That's just not the way that it works. It's not that kind of a sport. Basketball is different. The better team wins, you'd say probably 85% of the time or so if it's really a dominant team. But you could easily have, the best team in baseball go down to the worst team in the playoffs in the first round, and it wouldn't surprise anybody any year to me. So we've got basically a few good bets here. I think that I mentioned the 76ers, Houston, and the Clippers would be the teams I would lean towards. Again, I love the Bucks also, but I don't want to, you're not getting great odds with the Clippers or the Bucks, so I probably would just leave those bets alone. I'll throw a little bit on the Rockets, but just because I have a personal bias, but I don't think that at 12-1, it's the kind of odds I wanted. If they were like 17 or 20-1, somewhere in the Sixers range, somewhere in the Raptors range or the Celtics range, I'd like them. I think there's going to be a lot of heat, a lot of heavy. I'm sort of surprised the Celtics are still 17-1. I thought they were going to be like a trendy team because they're young, a lot of interchangeable parts in a lot of important positions, which I really like about their team. What I don't trust is a guard-driven team without, unless they really give it to Tatum. And maybe, look, this time off should make Tatum better. It also should, in all reality, the Miami Heat players, every day they get older, every experience they had in the league, this is almost like their second season for some of these young guys, some of the young rookies in Miami. So you can make an argument for them too. When it comes down to winning a title, I just don't see those teams being the kind of teams that are going to be able to pull out a 4 out of 7, where I could see that with the Rockets. Because, at any given series, Westbrook and Harden may end up being the best two players on the floor for that series. I'm not saying they're the best two, against the Lakers if they played it, but in a series against them, they could certainly be the better players. They're that talented. So Philly is sort of the same thing with, you got Embiid, who might be the most dominant player in this playoffs. We'll see it. He's a guy who you always think, in my mind, as long as he's semi-healthy, he's going to be a dominant postseason player for his whole future. But I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear what you think about those bets. I'm going to jump over to baseball in a minute, but in the meantime, get some thoughts in on those bets and some of your favorite odds here. Sheets is saying, let's see, admission at 25-1. You know what, Sheets? Even if Jokic is on a mission at 25-1, I don't think we can possibly go with a Denver team that I just have no faith in whatsoever in the postseason. And it's not like they've ever been good in these tough games. They don't beat good teams in the postseason. They haven't yet. Jokic is not a guy who's like outperformed everybody and dominated a playoff series yet. I'm not saying that won't and can't happen. This team barely got by the Spurs last year, and the Spurs were, in my opinion, the worst team in the playoffs in the West, at least in the West last year. So those are some bets I like. If you want to look for some sneaky first round upset bets, just because of the volatility of where things are at, who knows who's going to get what. We don't even know that the Pelicans are going to make the playoffs, but I'm sure that they've got some pretty decent potential playoff. Let's see. It's not to reach playoffs. We want to see them getting a win. So you'd have to do some complicated betting, but they're a team that I could see giving the Lakers a hard time. I really think Houston creates a really tough matchup for the Lakers, and the Clippers do. Other than that, I think the Lakers are going to get by everybody. But if there was one other team I'd pick that can maybe give them a little bit of a series might be the Pelicans, just with all that young talent, and really started to come in their own a little bit before the break. And now Zion's had time to rest and should be fully healthy. He was, we were babying him in, and this might be a real spot here. So I like that sort of situation. That pictures of Zion, by the way, and Dan just brought it up in chat. We've seen the pictures of Jokic, but which I guess is more surprising than Zion. But Zion looks incredible. I mean, this guy, and I'm sorry, that's a maybe different kind of show, but like this guy is a beast. I'm so excited for this guy's future. Mostly I'm just praying to have this back. If we have this, we're going to absolutely crush. Life. It's going to be incredible. We're going to have DFS back. We're going to have games bets going on daily. We're going to have shows going on all the time. We're going to be here for you guys. And honestly, it's going to be the best time in the history of sports betting to make money. And I personally can't wait for it. I'm trying to set aside, not get too heavily invested in everything else in the meantime, because I want to be able to have a lot on the line for what I think is going to be a highly volatile situation that's going to be really beneficial to those of us who are really plugged into. And I plan on being one of the most plugged in as plugged in as anybody else. So that's my sort of thoughts for the basketball. Again, any other thoughts? We'll jump real quickly to, that's a championship winner, conference winners. You get into a funny spot with conference bets, because at that point, I feel like I usually would rather just bet on the team to win the title. Personally, the Lakers and Clippers are being treated as if, whichever one of them wins, they're going to be the favorite against the Bucks, based sort of on this number, even though the Bucks have a better overall number. That's because it's easier to get out of the East. I do think the odds for the Rockets just aren't quite where I'd want them to be. I just don't think I can make any of those other extreme bets that I wouldn't make. I mean, Philly, obviously, I would make that bet. But again, I think Philly could easily win the title. If Philly gets to the finals, I don't think that anybody's going to scare them. I still think the Clippers and Lakers are better, but we don't know what's going to happen with the COVID stuff. We don't know who's going to even be healthy just anyway, because it's a sort of a different situation that we haven't run into. And the Sixers are just a unique, unusual, tough team to play. I mean, just clog up the lane. They've got some speed and athletes out on the wing. Some young guys, guys like Thibault and Richardson on the wings who are solid defenders, to combine with that incredible interior defense. I just feel like they're going to be really not a fun team to pick on. So you have all the different odds. I think if there's one you want for the craziest odds of the teams that I actually like a little bit, I guess, you could say the 76ers, either 76ers, Clippers, or Lakers are pretty good odds. But I also think you could take this, if we want to make the real hammer bet, we could take my 76ers and my Rockets. I'm trying to find out where that bet is right now. Let's see where we can. 76ers, Rockets. Yeah, so you've got 80-1 there. It probably should be a little higher, but I think if you played this out 80 times, it happens at least more than once on average. That's my personal take. Not too interested in the Raptors, although I understand the love for them. This is not where I'm going with my bets personally. Luke just mentioned, what about the Celtics? I did mention the Celtics earlier. I think that they're a good team. I think the odds are a little bit messy. Again, I like Houston in this format. I wish they were a little deeper, to be honest with you. That's one thing I worry about with Houston. The Celtics have the youth, the depth, the interchangeable parts where they could even deal with an injury potentially and get through a round. I could see that happening. I just don't see them coming out and winning it all. Maybe winning the East is a more of a reasonable bet for me for them. I don't like the way that they would match up with either the Lakers or the Clippers personally, but I do think that they have a better chance maybe at coming out of the East. So that's an interesting bet for the Celtics. What do you got? At 7-1. Not an amazing bet to me, but I'm okay with it. I just don't love the Celtics. I don't think they're going to win a title this year. I like their future. I like what they're building. I love what Tatum's becoming. I'm just not quite going there yet. And we don't want to get involved in the total wins. The Grizzlies, obviously more likely to make the playoffs. I think this is a really strong bet to bet on New Orleans here. Would probably have to beat the Grizzlies 2 out of 3 because of how many games are left in the season. And again, there's other teams that could get there too. You got just behind them, the Blazers with Nurkic and Collins back. That could be some scary business right there. So I actually like all of those guys. You can't make all these bets and be profitable. If there was one I would lean to, I would lean on New Orleans or Portland. If I bet on Portland, though, I probably would make a really bizarre play and try and see if I could get them to win 2 rounds or something like that, because they're just the kind of team that you just don't want to face in the postseason. Dame Lillard is truly one of the best and sickest human beings alive, and I think he could carry a team for a series, especially if somehow you ended up losing a LeBron or an AD or something like that. So that's sort of my thoughts on those ones. In terms of the game lines, we'll obviously get into that when it comes closer. It seems obviously silly to talk about that now. We're just talking about future bets, but that's sort of where I am, Luke. I'm fine with the Celtics. It's just not my favorite thing in the world. And we're going to jump over to baseball unless anybody has any thoughts or questions before we get out of here. Again, I know we're not going to have a lot of people here on this personal one. If you happen to be watching this webcast a little bit later, feel free to hit us up, respond. I'll check out the YouTube comments, but also you can hit me up on Twitter at Bobby Fi. I'm with the BetQL people too. You can hit up them at BetQL, at RotoQL, both of them. This is something we should be focusing on because we're going to have things come up on live shows that, then somebody's going to get injured. What do I do now? You're going to have things like that when the season goes. And in the meantime, we literally there's going to be a huge range of outcomes of what's going to happen, which is partly why I like some of these long shot bets. Speaking of which, let's get into the baseball part of this. We're going to see some baseball future bets that I think are this is where I think you can try and get some ridiculous edge here. We didn't get into player futures yet, but maybe we'll talk about that at the end here. So, okay, the Dodgers as the favorite certainly makes sense to me. It's harder to get it out of the AL. Probably the Dodgers are clearly the best team in the National League. I would say the best team in baseball, but that hasn't stopped us. Probably been the best team in baseball about 6 out of the last 15 years and have 0 titles to show for it. So it doesn't always mean anything, but I do like the Dodgers as being the best team. I think that makes sense. I think the Angels are a sneaky bet at 35-1. I think the Twins, where are they now? I think the Twins got moved up. Yeah. Initially the Twins were, I think, closer to 30-1 or 20-something, some odd to 1. I just remember them standing out to me as a team I really like this year. I like all these teams up at the top. I like the Nationals. I would prefer them over the Phillies, but it's really close with the Braves. And that's that division is just by far the best in baseball. And you got the Mets in there too. Like it's going to be, somebody's going to be way underperforming, and other guys are going to be way overperforming. Usually, if you're betting on the underperforming, it's usually going to be the Mets. But I happen to love the Mets with their pitching staff this year, and I just think that they're going to be really strong too. It's a really tough one for me to pick. So I would rather not pick a World Series team out of that division because I believe the playoff route is much more difficult. Remember, we only have 60 games. Last year, the first 60 games, the Washington Nationals won the World Series last year, and through the first 60 games of the season, they were 2 games under 500. And not in the top, I think were they 19th in baseball of records or 20th, something like that out of 30 teams. It's a highly volatile situation. It should be treated as such. We want guys with good pitching staffs, but honestly, they don't need to be deep or good bullpens. That's sort of what you're looking at. But honestly, it's just going to be hugely variant and with what we have going on. So I like this Marlins idea. I don't mind taking a shot on the Tigers. If there was one team on the higher end that I actually think would, have a better, more realistic chance, and again, I'm talking about 50,000 plus 50,000. I would pick the Royals or Mariners as the most likely, but nobody's especially likely. But in this format, why not take a shot on the Royals and Marlins or something like that? And I mean, you're getting just ridiculous odds. Put a little bit on it. I'm going to do it. I think it's a crazy volatile year, like I said. Again, the Marlins are a little bit further fetched to me because of how tough their division is. The Royals, I think, have a better path. We've seen a lot of teams in the AL Central over the past 10 years sort of pop out of nowhere, including the Royals when they won their World Series. They were predicted to have the worst record in baseball that year. So and that was over 162 games. So obviously, they have some young talent there. It's not like they don't have any pieces. Those are the teams I would lean towards on the very, very, very high, ridiculous odds end. In the middling tier, again, I like the Angels at plus 3,500. I think the Brewers are interesting. I really like the Reds as an overall play. They would probably be my favorite pick in the National League outside the Dodgers because they don't have as tough a division. They only have the Cubs and Cards to go through. And none of those teams are bad, but I actually think the Reds make a big jump up this year. I like them quite a bit. So, guys, get some other questions in. Again, pop in and say hi if you haven't yet. We want to hear from you. We want this to be an interactive show. It's kind of hard because we don't have the regular sports, but we're doing the best we can with our futures bets. And, we'll get into some of the more detailed stuff in a minute. I'm just going to check chat real quick and make sure I didn't miss anything. Looks like there's a few things. Let's see. Got to know it. Plus 450 was a surprise. 60-game baseball season is max variance. No one under 20-1 makes any sense to me. Sheets completely agree. I would not be betting on any of the teams under 20-1. But I think there's a huge value in taking a shot just on everybody else. And look, if you want to put together like $200 or whatever it is for you that's comfortable, $500, $1,000 for me, maybe I would say, and just take shots on all these long shot teams, the ones that I like the best. I just think that yeah, it's probably going to lose $1,000. But if I win, I could make like 100,000. I mean, let's get real here. I don't know. So that's sort of where I am. We'll look at Vlad to win the MVP. That's actually a good thought, Sheets. I want to take a look at that. Thoughts on the Reds, Luke? I don't know when the question came in, but I did say I really like the Reds. I think that they are the team that I would pick aside from the Dodgers because I think that division is a little more winnable. But it's not a picnic with the Cubs and Cardinals. I just happen to think that they're going to be a little bit better than those teams, whereas the AL East is such a wild card to me. So I like the Reds, but again, 25-1 feels like I could be getting them at like 35 or 40-1. Two other teams in the division also at 20-1. Not my favorite thing in the world. We're not going to bet anybody on the Astros winning the MVP this year. It's certainly not going to be that guy. I know who you're talking about, even though I can't get the name right off the top of my head there, Sheets. I'll jump over real quick to some of those individual bets, the players' futures. Let's see the AL MVP, or the NL MVP, excuse me. No, the AL MVP. We want to see that. We wanted to see what are the odds on Vlad Guerrero. So he's at 50 plus 5,000. Okay. I don't think that's an incredibly great value. We've got him basically as the top 20 to win the MVP. I feel like that's about accurate. That seems pretty real to me. I like him better than Grandal. I like him better than LeMahieu. I like him better than Bogarts. I don't know. I like him better than Josh Donaldson. Those are the guys I like him better above him. I like him better than Ohtani because I think it's going to be hard for Ohtani to actually win the MVP. But if there was a year where Ohtani could win the MVP, this is probably it. You don't have that huge sample you need to deal with, having him put up the numbers every day. It's only 60 games to play through, so you feel like he should be able to pitch and hit. I just feel like he makes sense. Jordan Alvarez, I'm not going to buy in. I think he's a good hitter. I don't think he's realistically one of the best three hitters on the Houston Astros lineup. I don't know if we can find out the hit by pitch expectations for Game 1. Maybe a little closer to the season starting. I really do think the hit by pitches for the Astros are just going to be fascinating. Some other interesting, maybe really long shot bets. Unfortunately, we just found out Miguel Sano has COVID. I love Miguel Sano and Nelson Cruz both at 12,500. I think those are sneaky. I think Tim Anderson is sneaky. I think Chris Davis is always a solid, the team has to put it together one of these years, and he's got to lead the league in home runs. That's basically, there's a recipe for it. We know it. JD is probably a little too low. I'm not actually sure why he's so low. I feel like that's probably now that I look back at the top, I would say JD would be the guy who I would say has the best chance, who's not, up there. And maybe you could even throw a guy like Stanton in there after he's sort of been forgotten and the odds have gotten a little bit crazy. I don't think he's ever usually this far out on the possible MVP race. So anyway, jumping over to some other ones. I also think guys like Austin Meadows, I'm going to leave those ones alone for now, but I do sort of like Tampa Bay. I didn't mention them because I believe that where did they end up on the team futures? They were my what I wanted to be my sneaky team, but they ended up being the odds ended up being below 20, 18-1. It's just not logical enough to me. It doesn't make enough sense for me to go that route. So favorite bets are these long shot guys. Again, favorite middling ones. I think that the Angels are a really good value. I really like that bet. It's interesting to think that you have the MVP who's like a 2-1 favorite to win the MVP, and your team is 35-1 to win it all. Now, usually MVPs, other than Mike Trout, play on good teams. But the Angels actually have talent. This is a much better Angels team. The Padres are moving in the right direction too, just behind them. But it's definitely, if I'm keeping this middle of the road, it's the Angels and Brewers for me. Those are the guys I would be looking at 35-1, basically. And I don't think I would touch any bets beneath that just because of the volatility of the season and the situations. I mean, again, I really like the Twins. I just don't see myself making that bet. I would be high on, I would be betting the Royals, as I mentioned. I'd be betting the Tigers. I would be betting a tiny sprinkling on every one of these teams, by the way, because it's a 60-game season. I'm just going to keep reminding everybody that. And also, when the Marlins won the World Series the first time, the odds were similar to this. When the Royals won their last title, the odds were similar to this. It's happened in recent history. These numbers are ridiculous. They're just too far-fetched. It's a 60-game season. Embrace the variance. You want to make some money? Do that. And also embrace the variance with the MVPs. Maybe even looking for an MVP that might be a little bit, completely out of left field seeming that we should talk about, because you can get a guy who gets hot for, it happens every year where a guy hits 400 over 60 games and does whatever. I expect that to fully be something that could happen this year. Who's our most likely guy to probably do that? It's an interesting question. I know people are going to hate me for this, but where do we land on the? I'm guessing he's going to have pretty reasonable odds, but I like Altuve. I think he makes a lot of sense. Again, I like Springer, I like Correa, but I think Altuve in this format, this type of season, could be better because he could get that really hot streak and hit 400. It's really possible. This is in the realm of possibility. You also want the guys who could potentially hit 20 home runs in 60 games, 22 home runs, something like that. Probably going to win the home run title with a pretty big number. Who's the guy who can get really hot like that? That's why Stanton at 33-1 stands out like that. JD is a guy who could do both. He could hit 370 with 20 home runs. Like, he's got that in him. I would never consider betting on Mike Trout. Anyway, but I do think you want to embrace it. I really like Seager this year as an MVP candidate. I think his odds are worse than they should be. But, look, we've got the best player in history, Rhys Hoskins, at 66-1. So what can you say? And then my favorite guys, if I had to bet just without looking on who would win the MVP, I'd bet between Bellinger, Acuna, and Soto. Again, it's really tough between those three for me. I think those are the three best hitters in the National League this season. That's what I would bet on, but I don't want to bet on any of them at these particular price points. I would much rather lean towards a Rhys Hoskins at 66-1, towards a Corey Seager at 40-1, towards a Paul Goldschmidt at 40-1. Just to get further down, there's some other guys. Gavin Lux seems like a ridiculous bet. It's 60 games, and this kid is really good. He could absolutely get hot and do something like that. I probably would be a reach, but again, you already have the safety of him playing on a team that is by far the most likely to win their division in baseball. Nobody's even close to the Dodgers in terms of likelihood to win divisions. We can get to that in a minute, but that obviously makes these guys all better plays. And with these National League guys, I don't see as many guys who can maybe have that same crazy season. You could go with Yelich or Betts. We've seen them do that stuff before. I'm not going to bet Betts as the MVP playing in Dodger Stadium personally, even though I do like the Dodgers. I would lean the other. My favorites be Bellinger, Soto, and Acuna. But again, because of all things being considered, I'm going to where their price points are, I'm going to more likely lean down. Maybe take a shot on Justin Turner, although I don't necessarily love it. I do think the right one would be, the Hoskins, potentially Azuna, but I think Hoskins is a better bet. I think Albies is a solid bet. He could easily have a really good 60-day stretch, which he's done before. I wouldn't love the Muncy thing, although I could see him hitting a bunch of bombs. And I think that the Scherzer DeGrom thing, while these odds, I just don't see a pitcher winning the MVP in this particular format. You're going to get 12 starts. Like, you're going to go 12-0, basically. I just don't see it happening. So I would avoid pitchers for MVPs. I just don't. Really hard for me to imagine. Talking real quickly, we'll get out of here in just a few minutes, but real quickly about the Cy Youngs. I'm going to jump in, actually look in chat because I haven't seen from you guys in a little bit. He said, what is Alonso? Let's see what Alonso was. Where did I missed him. I'm sure he's up there, right? Yeah, 30-1. Actually, it's pretty reasonable for Alonso. I like that. I'll tell you who I don't like is Chris Bryant, and come after me on that one, but I just think his best days are a little bit behind him. I still think he's a good player, and over 60 games, anything could happen, but he's not my guy. VR, I think it's a really interesting call, Dan. Like, I don't know if I could make that bet myself. The guy's all over the map, but in a 60-game tops, maybe he is the right one. And you said Chris Davis, is the favorite or plus 3,300 to lead the major league in home runs. Okay, so Chris Davis is that makes him a great MVP bet, because this is a year where if he happens to hit 22 or 23 in 60 games. And let's say he wins by 4 or something like that, and the A's somehow, win the West, which is really possible. He absolutely could be the MVP. Sheet says the Blue Jays, Tigers, White Sox are wild plays. I don't think the White Sox are wild at all, but I do like them. The Mariners I would put as the other wild one. I'm with you on the rest of it. Seager from the Dodgers to win MVP. Seager's only 40-1, but Seager has got a great shot to win the MVP this year. I really believe that. What is Vlad? We already looked at that one, and then we talked about the rest of them. So we'll talk about a few more before we get out of here. Look, I think the Marlins. If you're going to play the Marlins to win it all, why not do a parlay with a VR MVP at least in one of the bets just for fun? Come on, what are you getting on these odds? You're going to be ended up with 50,000 to 1 or something like that. More, you could make an absolute. Actually, it's going to be 200,000 to 1 if you do that. Jeez. More work. Wow. Anyway, I got to do some math on that one, but that is an interesting little idea. It's interesting when you look at it, just how heavy of a favorites we have. We have five guys better than 10-1 in the National League. In the American League, we have one guy at 2-1, and then only 3 guys at 10-1 or better. So I think that's a little bit just an interesting thing to note. And Cy Youngs, I would absolutely be looking at. My favorite would be, and actually the funniest part is, wow, how is he not higher on this list? Am I missing? Yeah, Walker Buehler. Okay, there he is. I would have picked Walker Buehler to win I think he's going to win the Cy Young this year. He's my bet for it. I mentioned how tough the East is going to be. I think DeGrom and Scherzer are the best pitchers, but I think that Walker Buehler, again, it's going to be hard to get out of that East, and Walker Buehler has really, really come into his own and is one of the best, 5 to 10 pitchers in baseball. He just hasn't had the full amount of his career yet to prove it, but he's right there right now. He's awesome. I don't know if I love any of these longer shot ones. If I lean towards one, I think because they can get hot and like put up some ridiculous numbers, I would think Lamet and John Gray are kind of interesting. If Lamet was a little bit further odds, I would have much more interest. John Gray, I think at 66-1 is mildly interesting if the Rockies can make a charge for that wild card spot, and Gray has like one of those 10-2 or 9-1 with a couple no decisions and strikes out 10 guys, 11 guys a game on average. He's interesting. Herman Marquez for the same thing. These guys are guys who can all get hot. So I sort of like trying to find the high K, potentially low ERA, hopefully, obviously, but you want to find the guy who's going to be on a team that is going to be contending. And pretty much these odds are pretty solid. I don't see anybody down below these guys that I really want to go crazy with. I just want to mention, though, that Fultonavich was nearly the Cy Young guy a couple of years ago. Halfway through the season, he was the best pitcher in baseball. And I know he's all over the map. I could see him writing it for a 60-game sample size, which would be kind of interesting. I like Trevor Bauer quite a bit, actually, now that I look back at it. 22-1 is a little too much for him. I would prefer Bauer towards anybody in this price range by a long shot. And again, I like these Reds. I think Trevor Bauer actually, there's the bet. Trevor Bauer at 22-1, he wins the Cy Young this year in the National League. That's my prediction. I actually think Walker Buehler is going to, but the best bet is if Walker's going to lose to anybody, I hope he loses to Bauer, because that's the guy who I think has the best odds. And in the American League, I think it's interesting that you're getting Corey Kluber at 22-1. I know I'm going with all the old Indian guys, but I'm open to it. Not going to go with the Garrett Cole, Blake Snell, Verlander combination. Clevenger, I would like if he was worse odds. Same with Bieber. Just seems like too high. I think that Kluber has got a path. I think Berrios has a path. I'm shocked that Carrasco's 22-1 after what we saw from him last year. I would be much more interested in Carrasco. I would have thought he was like 50-1. I think James Paxton at 40-1 is a great bet. That's probably the best bet I see on this board that jumps out. If you want to light money on fire, you can bet on Lance Lynn, but I think you're just lighting money on fire. Dylan Bundy, if he was a little worse, I know he can't be worse odds because they don't even release him, but he would have to probably be even a little worse, but kind of interesting. Same thing with Evaldi. Both guys have upside, but I don't know if they have upside to win a Cy Young. Although this is a year where you can really win a Cy Young without doing all that much. I really like this James Paxton price. I really don't understand it. I know the Yankees have a long bullpen, but like, what if this guy just goes out there and throws complete games every game of the season and wins, all but one? He's going to win a bunch of games anyway because the Yankees are going to score a million runs. Really like Paxton here. He would be my favorite bet in the American League Cy Young race. So I'm going to check real quick back with chat, guys. It seems like she's saying, Sonny Gray was, but Sonny Gray's actually, I think, pretty popular on here from what I remember. 40-1. I mean, not crazy, but I'm not going to bet on him to win the Cy Young. He's 40-1. Trevor Bauer's 22. They play for the same team. I'm going to go with Trevor Bauer if it comes to that. Boyd, sure. I'm fine with Boyd, but I don't see him as a better play than these other ones. It's interesting to me to see Boyd. I believe he has better odds than our boy Paxton over here. Is that right? That seems a little silly. Is everybody forgetting that Paxton is a much better? About the same. 50-1. Okay, Boyd, I can get behind that. I mean, look, if you're going to bet the Tigers, bet Boyd. But again, you got to remember you're betting on a pitcher on a rough team. What a pitcher would have to do on a bad team this year, I think, might have to be a little bit higher. But there's also in only 12 starts, probably there's more room for that to be done. And maybe we should just mention that Hyun-Jin Ryu should be in this conversation. I don't know, just where I just think he's worth noting. at 35-1. But I would prefer Paxton above all these guys personally. Look, are they going to give Ohtani enough chances in a format like this? Maybe he does. Maybe. But I would rather err with Paxton, who is a proven entity and I believe can win a Cy Young on a team where he might go. He could easily not lose a game this year. All right, guys. Any other questions before I get out of here? It's been great to have you. I know it's only a few people who tuned in so far, but we're going to have this show completely filled up in no time. We just haven't had a sport to go with yet. So this is the first time back. It's great to see everybody who did pop into chat. Really appreciate the thoughts and questions. And we'll keep this stuff rolling in the future. And hopefully we'll, before you know it, be back loaded with a million, we'll have hundreds of people on these shows because we have baseball to talk about. We have basketball to talk about. And hopefully that's what it comes from. Luke, I appreciate the nice feedback. You guys have always been really good to me. So for BetQL, I'm Bobby Fi saying good luck out there. And we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.